Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to start by saying I really apologize for the ICC one that we did. I didn't realize that there was a pretty hellacious echo in it. So I'm working on redoing that video right now, and we'll get it back up as soon as we can. I'm going to go through and repeat the timestamps, basically redo the whole video. I tried to process it with my audio software that I have, and it was still not good. So I sent it to a friend who knows a little bit more than I do, and it was still not good. So we're just gonna redo it because we had a comment that it was unwatchable, and they weren't wrong. It's really like echoey. So hence the headphones on this one. We're going to make sure that we don't have that problem. Anyway, this is Face to Face with Dion and Shawn. I'm Dion.
And I'm Shawn.
So today we're going to talk about the Senate hearing that happened on the origin of everyone's favorite virus, Corona. So they had a hearing where they're talking about it. We got timestamps. Hopefully, if you guys have seen it before, you know how this works. So let's, before we start, thanks to Shawn for setting this up. He's the one who went through, watched it all, had the timestamps, who's speaking, et cetera, et cetera. So here we go. All right. So our first little snippet starts right at the beginning of the video, and it is the chair, Senator Peters, from, he's a Democrat from Michigan. That's what I thought. Okay, so here we go.
The COVID-19 pandemic was one of the worst public health crises that our country has ever faced. We lost more than 1 million Americans to the virus, family members and neighbors, friends and colleagues, and millions more died around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic led to a once-in-a-generation event that not only threatened our public health, but also created unprecedented challenges to our economic and homeland security, as well as our very way of life. As Americans navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, they endured changing healthcare guidance, uncertainty and misinformation about how to best protect themselves and their families from this deadly virus.
Yeah, we did face a lot of misinformation. Interestingly enough, it seems that a lot of it came from our government.
Today's hearing is intended to examine the available scientific evidence related to the virus that causes COVID-19 and provides some transparency to Americans who are continuing to have to navigate their exposure to the virus. As chairman of this committee, I led an investigation into the federal government's initial pandemic response. The report was called Historically Unprepared and included recommendations on how we can ensure that we're better prepared to prevent and respond to future pandemics. This March, I also launched a bipartisan biosecurity and life science research investigation with Ranking Member Paul to look into a wide range of constantly evolving biological risk and threats to better enhance our preparedness for future incidents. This morning, we're going to hear from academic experts who can discuss how COVID-19 pandemic may have started and how we can learn from this outbreak to better address future potential infectious disease outbreaks and protect human life. Better understanding of the possible origins of COVID-19 pandemic is not only important to our public health, it is also a matter of homeland security. We must learn from the challenges faced during this pandemic to ensure we can better protect Americans from future potential biological incident. Our government needs the flexibility to determine the origins of naturally occurring outbreaks as well as potential outbreaks that could arise from mistakes or malicious intent. All that said, the history has shown us it is seldom simple or straightforward to identify the singular cause of an infectious disease outbreak. It can take months or years to pinpoint an origin, and in some cases, we may never find the answer. This is also the case with COVID-19. There are theories that indicate that COVID-19 began either by entering the human population through an entirely natural means or possibly through a lab incident or accident. Given the likelihood that the Chinese government may never fully disclose all the information they have about the initial COVID-19 outbreak, we must use the scientific information available to better prepare for future potential pandemics. We must not only examine the scientific information we have about COVID-19, but also the tools and procedures the government has in place to understand such viral outbreaks and how we can prevent them from becoming widespread in the future.
Okay. I mean, right. The short version is, yeah, we need to know where it came from, but like he said, we may never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to hear what the evidence is for and against the two favorite, I guess theories that are out there. So the next clip we have is actually from 351 to 852. I meant to tell you. In order to find this video, it is on Forbes, and it's called Breaking News, COVID-19 Lab Leak Theory Cover-Up Probed in Senate Homeland Security Committee. So you guys can find it if you want. The next one is from Ranking Member Senator Paul, Republican from Kentucky.
Now I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Paul for his opening remarks.
Today we are here to examine one of the most critical and debated questions of our time. Did COVID-19 originate in a lab? To answer this question, let's revisit the early days of the pandemic and examine what some of Dr. Anthony Fauci's inner circle said privately about the origins of the virus. Discussions that were only revealed through FOIA litigation. Christian Anderson wrote, "The lab escape version of this is so friggin' likely to have happened because they were already doing this type of work, and the molecular data is fully consistent with that scenario." Ian Lipkin stressed the nightmare of circumstantial evidence to assess regarding the possibility of inadvertent release, given the scale of bat coronavirus research pursued in Wuhan. Bob Gary said, "I really can't think of a plausible natural scenario where you get from the bat virus or one very similar to it to COVID-19, where you insert exactly 4 amino acids, 12 nucleotides, and all have to be added at the exact same time to gain this function. I just can't figure out how this gets accomplished in nature." According to Gary, it's not crackpot to suggest this could have happened given the gain of function research we know was happening at Wuhan. These are all private statements, which you'll discover today differ greatly from their public statements. Even Ralph Barrick, world-famous gain-of-function researcher and collaborator with Wuhan's Dr. Shi, admitted, so they, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, have a very large collection of viruses in their laboratory. And so it's, proximity is a problem. It's a problem. Federal court orders reveal that even Dr. Fauci himself privately acknowledged concerns about gain-of-function research in Wuhan and mutations in the virus that suggest it might have been engineered, just days before he commissioned the proximal origin paper. Despite these private doubts, publicly, these so-called experts and their allies were dismissing the lab leak theory as a conspiracy. Within days, Anderson, Lipkin, and Gary were putting final touches on what would be remembered as one of the most remarkable reversals in modern history. In their proximal origin paper, these scientists concluded, "We do not believe that any type of laboratory-based scenario is plausible."
And just to support that, I don't know if you guys remember, but it was like the fastest turnaround in human history from something someone said to the next day. I mean, it was like 3 days. They said, yeah, there's, we believe it might be. And then all of a sudden it was, no, absolutely not. There's no possibility it could be a lab leak. Remember that?
Privately, they were saying one thing. Publicly, they were saying another. Media pundits parroted the narrative while social media platforms censored discussion about the lab leak, labeling it as misinformation and stifling open discourse about the virus's origins. The cover-up went beyond public statements. Federal agencies and key officials withheld and continue to conceal crucial information from both Congress and the public. For instance, Dr. David Morenz of the NIH deleted emails that could have contained valuable insights into early discussions. When he deleted them, he made the comment, "I think we're safe now." He deleted emails. He said, the early emails I've deleted to Peter Daszak at EcoHealth, I think we're safe now. The ODNI failed to comply with a law that was passed unanimously. One of the senators on this committee got it passed. We were going to declassify all this and revealed it, and the administration has refused. HHS and NIH have not produced documents related to the gain-of-function research that the chairman and I requested nearly a year ago. I've been asking for 2 or 3 years as an individual member with some other Republican members and have not gotten these records. I've now asked with the Democrat chairman over a year, and they're still resisting.
What could the reason possibly be to withhold such valuable information?
They're hiding something.
Well, yeah. I mean, come on. But of course, it's just a conspiracy theory.
They say it's not gain of function. Well, let's hear the debate. Did they debate at NIH whether it was gain of function in Wuhan? If there's a debate, let's hear the scientific arguments on both sides. They will not give us that information. This has been a deliberate, prolonged effort to deceive the committee about certain gain of function research experiments that the agencies have been withholding. What we have found as we've gone through this is that at every step, there's been resistance. So the hearing today is to try to find out whether or not we can get to the truth. Do we know for certain it came from the lab? No, but there's a preponderance of evidence indicating that it may have come from the lab. Do we know viruses have come from animals in the past? Yes, they've come from animals in the past. But this time there's no animal reservoir. There's no animal handlers with antibiotics. There's a lot of reasons why there are indications that this could well have come from the lab. This is what the discussion we'll have today. This is.
Yeah. I mean, he nails it. Preponderance of evidence is a term that's widely used actually in scientific circles as well, because when you establish a theory on something, it's always going to be a theory, right? Other than their laws, right? Like the law of gravity, we know that exists because a series of experiments using theories, and then they go with a preponderance of the evidence, or the majority of the evidence shows. The next one is 909 to 934. And it's the swearing in of witnesses. There's a reason that Shawn included this.
I hope we have a spirited debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Paul. It is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses. So if each of you would please stand and raise your right hands. Do you swear the testimony that you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So
I'm going to pause it just real quick so we can get out of your way so you can see who we have here. I'm going to see if I can look. So it looks like we have a Gregory Koblenz, PhD, a Robert Gary, PhD, a Stephen Quay, MD, PhD, and a Richard Ebright, PhD. So a whole lot of really, really smart people.
so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Okay. So you see who the cast of characters are now. Our first one is actually Gregory Koblenz. He is an associate professor and director of the Biodefense Graduate Program at George Mason University. So he tends to know quite a bit about biodefense, like using viruses to hurt people. So this is from the 10:55 to 13:45. So 10 minutes, 55 seconds. To 13:45. Gregory Koblenz.
First, let me directly address the main topic of the hearing today, the available evidence on the origins of COVID-19. More than 4 years after the start of the pandemic, the origin of the SARS-CoV-2 virus remains a subject of debate. There are two pandemic pathways that have been widely discussed to explain how SARS-CoV-2 emerged in Wuhan in 2019, a natural spillover event from animals to humans, or an actual release of a pathogen from a laboratory. The possibility that SARS-CoV-2 was deliberately developed as a biological weapon has been unanimously rejected by all U.S. intelligence agencies. While the intelligence community is divided on the origin of the pandemic, most of the agencies have determined that the virus was not genetically engineered. I believe the available evidence points most strongly to a natural zoonotic spillover event as the origin of the pandemic. However, a research-related accident can't be ruled out at this time. A key obstacle to more definitive conclusion is the lack of transparency exercised by the Chinese government, which affects assessments of both potential pathways to the pandemic. Until there's an independent, international, and transparent investigation, it's unlikely we'll be able to come up with a more definitive conclusion that will satisfy both sides of the debate. It's not my intention to review this debate today. Instead of looking backwards, I prefer to look forwards and plan for the future. The reality is that we're not as well prepared to prevent, detect, respond to, or recover from a biological incident or pandemic as we should be, regardless of its origin. The growing H5N1 outbreak in the United States is a testament to the challenges we currently face and the urgency of addressing them. The difficulty in determining the origin of COVID-19 is not unusual. Among the outbreaks and pandemics we've already experienced this century, it's taken years to identify the origin of a novel pathogen, sometimes in only general terms. Rarely is it possible to identify the exact sequence of events that led to the first human infection that sparked a pandemic. Determining the origin of an outbreak or pandemic can be divided into 4 stages: detection, identification, characterization, and attribution. Understanding how a specific pathogen entered and spread in a population to cause an outbreak is a multidisciplinary undertaking that requires expertise in epidemiology, human medicine, veterinary medicine, biology, genetics, bioinformatics, ecology, anthropology, and related fields. Seeking the origin of an outbreak requires collecting and analyzing a large amount of data collected from diverse sources by a range of agencies with a variety of scientific capabilities and disciplinary specializations. The quality of the data and the rigor of the epidemiological and scientific investigation will affect the level of confidence we have in these determinations.
I just want to draw your attention to this man's mustache. I don't know if you could see it, but it's got curls on the end. Like,
Didn't even notice
just
that.
saying, yeah. I just thought that was cool.
Determinations of the origin of a pandemic or an outbreak are rarely definitive and need to be carefully qualified to reflect the strength of available evidence as well as gaps and uncertainties.
All right. So I think oh, no, not quite. Almost there.
Determining the origin of an outbreak can improve the effectiveness of response to an ongoing incident, reduce the likelihood of or magnitude of future incidents, or even prevent future outbreaks altogether. Making this determination, however, is not always straightforward or successful.
Okay. So basically, if I had to sum it up, I'd say you need a whole lot of people with a whole lot of really, really esoteric type knowledge to actually find the origin of something. And even just figuring out like what it is was a big undertaking. You know, you got to figure out what it is, figure out.
And you have China standing in the way, not helping.
Right. And of course, you have good old China who isn't going to help us.
No.
Obviously. Now, they did say something interesting that I found, and that is they have definitively ruled out that it was specifically created for gene warfare. Okay, maybe. I will tell you why I lean on the side of that being probably true, because I don't think it's a finished product. I think it would be a lot deadlier if it was a finished product. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The survival rate is way too high to be intended as a bioweapon. So I believe it was created, but I don't believe it was created specifically as a bioweapon. I think it was on the way to becoming one.
And it got leaked early? Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Put it this way.
Could be.
I can't rule that out, right?
No, I can't either.
The stuff that I've looked into regarding this, I did a lot of digging, a lot of listening to some really smart people who know way more about this stuff than I do. And the general consensus is if it was intended as a bioweapon, it's a particularly bad one because it's such a high survival rate, right? But we can't ignore the fact that they were doing this type of research in a lab. So what sort of research were they doing? Why would you create a virus that was initially in bats and now it's in humans, but we can't find a link? There's no individual that had, like, no patient zero, right? Mm-hmm. And no animal that has this in it. That's what he said. That's what they said. There's no animal that has this virus. So it somehow went from this other virus to this. What do you think? I think it's very possible that that's, what happened. On the other hand, maybe it is naturally occurring, but if it is, where's the jump? Where's the origin that came from whatever, right? Yeah. Whether it's a bat, whether it's a pangolin, whether it was wet soup, whatever, they have been unable to locate said source. Our next individual to speak is Richard Embright. He is a long one, all right? Super smart guy, apparently. Board of Governors, professor of chemistry and chemical biology, and laboratory director for Waxman Institute of Microbiology and Rutgers University. So, yeah. And this is 3348 to 4043. Got to put my peepers on. Give me a second. These numbers are kind of little. Let's see, 3348.
Origin of COVID, and will summarize key lines of evidence that support my assessment. I assess that a large preponderance of evidence indicates SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, entered humans through a research incident. I base this assessment on information in publicly available documents, press reports, and scientific papers, on my research experience in microbial genomics, microbial genetics, DNA synthesis technology, and recombinant DNA technology, and on my knowledge of and experience with biosafety, biosecurity, and biorisk management for work with pathogens. 4 key facts support my assessment. First, COVID emerged in Wuhan, a city that is 800 miles from the closest bats harboring SARS-CoV-2-like viruses that could have served as progenitors of SARS-CoV-2, but that contains labs that prior to the outbreak were conducting the world's largest research program on bat SARS viruses, possessed the world's largest collection of bat SARS viruses, and possessed the virus most closely similar to SARS-CoV-2. The large distance between Wuhan and bats harboring SARS-CoV-2-like viruses points away from a natural origin of COVID, and Wuhan's status as the global epicenter of research on bat SARS viruses points toward a research origin of COVID. Second, in the 4 years preceding the outbreak, Wuhan labs performed research that placed them on a trajectory to obtain SARS viruses having high pandemic potential. And in 2018, 1 year before the outbreak, Wuhan labs proposed research to obtain SARS viruses having even higher pandemic potential and features that match in detail the features of SARS-CoV-2. Wuhan labs performed high-risk virus discovery and gain-of-function research on bat SARS viruses. In their virus discovery research, Wuhan researchers searched for new bat viruses in caves in southern China, brought samples to Wuhan, and sequenced, cultured, and characterized new viruses in Wuhan. In their gain-of-function research, Wuhan researchers genetically modified bat SARS viruses, constructing viruses having enhanced ability to infect human cells and having enhanced viral growth and enhanced lethality in mice engineered to possess human receptors for SARS viruses, so-called humanized mice. Already in 2015, scientists expressed concern that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was conducting research that posed unacceptably high risk. At a 2015 Royal Society and National Academies meeting on gain-of-function research and its oversight, the research on bat SARS viruses by the Wuhan Institute of Virology and its collaborators was singled out as the research most likely of all research in the world to trigger a pandemic. In 2017 to 2018, with NIH funding, the Wuhan Institute of Virology constructed genetically modified SARS viruses that combined the spike gene from one bat SARS virus with the rest of the genetic information from another bat SARS virus, obtaining new viruses that efficiently infected human cells and obtaining at least one new virus that exhibited 10,000 times enhanced viral growth in lungs and 1 million times enhanced viral growth in brains and 3 times enhanced lethality in humanized mice.
Yeah.
What?
That's why I picked this clip. Uh-huh.
Oh my God, dude. So this guy's just spilling it all. Just like, yeah, by the way, they're literally actually creating bioweapons over there. That's what they're for. That's what gain of function is all about. And telling us that these viruses they're making are extremely, extremely dangerous. Yeah, that's not terrifying at all.
Just wait until the
In
end.
2018, just 1 year before the outbreak, in an NIH grant proposal, the Wuhan Institute of Virology and collaborators proposed to construct additional genetically modified SARS viruses, proposing to construct viruses having spikes with even higher binding affinities for human SARS receptors, seeking viruses having even higher pandemic potential. Also in 2018, just 1 year before the outbreak, in a DARPA grant proposal, the Wuhan Institute of Virology and its collaborators proposed to construct genetically modified SARS viruses having a furin cleavage site, a feature associated with increased viral growth and increased transmissibility. They proposed to insert the furin cleavage site at the spike gene S1, S2 border and to construct the viruses by synthesizing 6 nucleic acid building blocks and assembling them using the reagent DSM-B1. Third, Wuhan Labs performed this research on SARS viruses using an inadequate biosafety standard, just biosafety level 2, and inadequate personal protective equipment, just gloves and a lab coat. Lab accidents that result in infection or release are common, even at biosafety levels higher than biosafety level 2.
That's okay. The fact that they're doing all this stuff without proper safety gear, guys, like, come on. And we're funding this. Our money is funding this.
And that was my reaction exactly when I watched this the first time.
We had higher safety standards at our doctor's office. Like, what, bruh? Gloves and a lab coat for potentially deadly. Anyway, let's get through this. If I stop every time they say something that shocks me, we're going to be here all night.
For context, the original SARS virus, SARS-CoV-1, caused lab-acquired infections in Singapore at biosafety level 3,
SARS.
in Beijing twice at biosafety level 3, and in Taipei at biosafety level 4. For further context, SARS-CoV-2 itself caused lab-acquired infections in Beijing in 2020 at biosafety level 3, and in Taipei in 2021 at biosafety level 3. The Wuhan lab's use of biosafety level 2 for research on bat SARS viruses would have posed a high risk, a very high risk, of infection of lab staff upon encountering a virus having the aerosol transmission properties of SARS-CoV-2. Fourth, in 2019, a novel SARS virus having a spike with extremely high binding affinity for human SARS receptors, a furin cleavage site inserted at the spike S1, S2 border, and a genome sequence with features enabling assembly from 6 synthetic nucleic acid building blocks using the reagent BSMB1, a virus having the exact features proposed in the 2018 NIH and DARPA proposals emerged on the doorstep of Wuhan Institute of Virology. SARS-CoV-2 is the only one of more than 800 known SARS viruses that possesses a furin cleavage site. Mathematically, this observation alone implies that the probability of finding a natural SARS virus possessing a furin cleavage site is less than 1 in 800. Taken together, the presence of a spike having an extremely high affinity for human SARS receptors, the presence of a furin cleavage site inserted at the spike S1, S2 border, the genome sequence enabling assembly from 6 synthetic nucleic acid building blocks using the reagent BSMB1, and the 1-4-1 match between these features and the features proposed in the 2018 NIH and DARPA proposals make an extremely strong case, a smoking gun, for a research origin. In summary, multiple lines of secure evidence point to a research origin. By contrast, as I hope I will have the opportunity to review in response to questions, no, zero secure evidence points toward a natural origin. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, yeah,
He
like
made the
he
case.
said, there is no evidence whatsoever that this natural origin thing exists. But a preponderance of evidence based on all the sciencey stuff he just said, he's telling you this is identical to what they were messing with. That's what he's telling us. Really, a whole bunch of sciencey speak, but he's showing he knows what he's talking about. This is exactly the same. That's exactly the same. This is exactly the same. The chances of that happening in the wild are virtually nil. Especially, we would have found something by now if it did happen naturally. Wow. Okay. So our next clip is from Chair Senator Peters, Democrat from Michigan. He is the guy we started off with, and that is from the 4146 to 4409. 4146. Close enough. All right.
First, the epidemiology. The early cases from December 2019.
This isn't Senator Peters. Could I get the timestamp wrong?
Oh, I might have done it wrong. Maybe he'll speak in a little bit.
Oh, hold on. I wrote it down wrong. 4116. That was my bad. Okay. Sorry. 4116 to 4409.
Assumptions based on what's out there. So my question for you, Dr. Gary, is could you elaborate more on the specific hard evidence that supports your claim that the Chinese market in Wuhan was the most likely source of the virus?
Certainly, and thank you for the question. There is a lot of evidence that this virus emerged from the Henan seafood market in Wuhan, but let me just focus on 3 points: epidemiology, molecular forensics, and genetics. First, the epidemiology. The early cases from December 2019, before the disease was even described, all centered around, in fact, they painted a bullseye on the Henan seafood market. The molecular forensics. Environmental samples were collected from the market after it was closed. The hotspot of SARS-CoV-2 positivity, the RNA, was in the southwest corner of the market. In those very same samples, RNA and DNA from raccoon dogs and mass palm civets was found in these samples, commingling with the SARS-CoV-2 RNA. Genetics. The SARS-CoV-2 spilled over at least twice in the market. The phylogenetics, the genetics of the virus are very clear about that. That is not compatible with a lab leak.
Dr. Gary, do we know that the virus that caused COVID-19 existed in the Wuhan lab before the pandemic? And if not, how could we find that out?
In fact, we don't know. The intelligence community has looked at that point very intently and has not been able to determine that Wuhan had the virus. We don't have the evidence from the Chinese. It's just one of the many things that we're missing that we would like to get from the Chinese government.
Based on the bat coronavirus that we know that researchers in the Wuhan lab are working on, would it have been possible for them to create this virus? Is it possible?
Not from a bat coronavirus. If you take the time to read my written testimony, I'm going to, in that document, I went through a lot of evidence that this virus did not spill over directly from a bat to a human being.
Okay. That's not what he asked him.
No.
I just want to make sure he didn't ask him whether it came from a bat. He's asking if this virus was present. And just in case you guys missed it, the answer was, we don't know. We claim no, but we don't know because China won't.
And I wanted to get both sides. That's why I picked.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I'm not missing a point because, yeah, it certainly seems kind of dippy to me, but whatever.
Had to go through an intermediate animal. And it's not just the evidence from the non-market. There's other genetic evidence. The bat coronaviruses are viruses that are spread by the gastrointestinal route. For a virus like this to become a respiratory virus is just going to require too many mutations, too many changes for a bat virus to spill directly over to a human being. That could only really happen in nature with replication through an intermediate animal.
Okay. So either an intermediate animal or a lab. What he's saying is, I'm not sure if he realizes this, but to me, he just completely explained why it's not naturally occurring. Which lends credence to the other guy, in my opinion, unless I'm completely missing what he said, because what he's saying is there's no way that this went from a bat to a human. It did not happen. There had to be an intermediary animal, or at least intermediary thing. He said animal, but if you, for example, took this, altered it, stuck it in something, let it mutate a little, grabbed it, stuck it in something else. That's what they do with these labs. Like okay. Am I missing something?
No, you're not.
I just making sure, because anyway. All right. So, but I think it was a good question. It was definitely a good question. I just don't think this guy answered it the way he thinks he answered it. Like, I don't know. It's kind of sketchy. Our next our next one is ranking member Senator Paul, Republican from Kentucky again, and we're at 48-48 to 55-35. Yeah, I had to double check the notes because I don't want to mess that up again. We're almost there. 48. Yeah, let's start at 48-44 so we don't miss anything important. And we're going to 55-35. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen.
Frontiers of Freedom and Dr. Alina Chan.
Without objection.
So just in the last few minutes, Dr. Gary has told us that this couldn't have come from bats. It had to go through an intermediate host. That may well be true, but arguing against that is they tested 90,000 some odd animals, and there is no animal host that's been found. But what he also doesn't tell you is the animal host could be a laboratory animal. It could be passed serially through that, and that's one way of quickly adapting and pushing natural selection to adapt a virus towards humans. Dr. Alina Chan has written extensively about this.
I haven't seen this, just so you guys know.
No, he hasn't. I'm the one who reviewed it.
Yeah, he's the one who watched all this. So, see, I'm just as smart as Senator Paul. Elect me. I'm just kidding. I'm not running. I'm just being dumb.
This virus didn't show up clunky and poorly transmissible. This virus showed up immediately very transmissible in humans, as if it had been pre-adapted in a lab. Dr. Ebright, Dr. Gary tells us that he's wedded to the scientific method and that he considered all the different possibilities in proximal origins. I know you're a professor, and I'm assuming you've been the senior author on many papers. I assume that you teach your younger researchers what is good scientific method and not good scientific method. In the abstract of proximal origins, Dr. Gary and his fellow authors state categorically that the virus is not a laboratory construct. That doesn't sound to me like open-mindedness, and I wonder what you would tell a younger researcher or someone you're instructing in the scientific method about putting categorical statements into a scientific paper.
Well, it's important to emphasize that the paper in question, Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2, published in March 2020, was not a research article. It was an opinion piece. It was published as a commentary, which is the section in the journal that holds opinion pieces and editorials.
I'm going to pause it right there because I remember the media running wild with that piece as if, because it was published in that journal, it had to be super scientific.
I remember that.
You remember that? They said there's no way it could have. There's no way it could have. That's an interesting point. I'm really glad you included that. It was an opinion piece, like a letter to the editor at the New York Times that you read that means F all. Wow, not a peer-reviewed paper. Keep that in mind.
So it was an opinion piece. The authors were stating their opinion, but that opinion was not well-founded. In March of 2020, there was no basis to state that as a conclusion, as opposed to simply being a hypothesis. Moreover, we know that compelling evidence has been presented as a result of congressional inquiry in the House that 4 of the authors of that paper, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Gary, Dr. Holmes, and Dr. Rambeau, in their private communications, show clearly that they knew the conclusion that they stated in that article was invalid.
Wow. So they basically said, yeah, we're going to say this even though we know it's wrong.
Or we don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, but like you said, in their private communications, they said they knew that was BS. So how do you rectify that? Were they under pressure to make that?
So
Possibility.
in terms of what I would tell a younger scientist I would be mentoring, I would tell a younger scientist that you do not state a conclusion without evidence, even in an opinion piece in a scientific journal.
Right.
And you never, under any circumstances in a scientific journal, state conclusions that you know to be unsound. That represents scientific misconduct. It represents scientific misconduct up to and including fraud. And the paper in question, the Proximal Origin paper, has been recommended for review of retraction. 2 requests, one in 2023 and one in 2024, were submitted by teams of scientists to the journal in question, to the journal editors, asking them to add an editorial expression of concern and to initiate a review for retraction of the article.
I don't know if you guys noticed this, but his hands
I was just going to bring that up.
are
It's
shaking
yes,
because he's so passionate about. Maybe he's just nervous, but I didn't see his hands shake when he addressed.
I was just going to bring that
when
up.
he did his opening statement. If you're going to be nervous, that's the opening statement is generally the worst when you're in front of all these people up there and all the press and the cameras. But he was fine then. Yeah, his hands are shaking. He's really, really trying to convey how bad this is. I mean, he even said misconduct up to and including fraud. That's the level of dishonesty that was going on with this.
I know of no other example in modern scientific history or publications where a publication has come forward pronouncing with such authority that the lab leak is implausible, it is not a laboratory construct, while privately saying, this is no friggin' conspiracy theory. It looks like it did. I'm 90-10. I'm 50-50. but no doubt in the paper. In fact, we know that it went back and forth with Dr. Fauci and with editors who say, we want the statements to be stronger. We want the conclusions to be stronger. That was actually coming from Nature at the time. We want you to doctor it up and even be more strong because we're making a political point here. That's where we should have known we were off track, that these people were politicians and that they were pushing an idea because, as Dr. Collins finally admitted in one of the emails, this is about the business of science with China. This will disturb our relations with China if anybody questions this. Dr. Quay, the idea that this came from the fish market, I thought had been discredited by virtually all of the scientists. Now, I'm really surprised it's still being presented here. I know that the Chinese, the CDC, George Gao over there, basically said that they no longer consider it. And actually, if you think about it from their perspective, we're not sure if we can trust them. But at the same time, the Chinese, if they would rather have it come from a lab or the market, I think would choose the market over the lab. If anything, they would be, if we were going to think they were dishonest, would be dishonest towards saying, hey, we found some animals. But if you could review stepwise, just a little bit slower, some of the evidence for why it's not there, the amount of animals tested, the animal handlers compared to SARS-1, but also the idea of this genetic diversity that, when SARS-1 came about the first time, I think it tried hundreds of times because these animal viruses don't infect humans well in the beginning. It tried hundreds of times over and over again. And even in the end, SARS-1 didn't transmit between humans very well. That's why containment worked. And that's why quarantine worked, because it wasn't very infectious. But go through a little bit, step by step, the evidence of why anybody still maintaining that it came from the market is misguided.
And in case you guys may or may not be aware, when he talks about SARS-CoV-1, right? That's the outbreak that happened prior to this one. It's the last administration, the Obama administration. We had that, didn't quite reach the levels where they called it a pandemic, but it was an outbreak. And like he said, it didn't do very well. Well, how do you fix that? You work on it. I'm the fan.
Sure. I mean, let me agree with Dr. Gary about SARS-1 being a spillover, and let me elaborate a little bit. There were 11 cities, 11 markets, 3 different lineages, and a 30 nucleotide difference among the initial cases and patients, which approximates about a year of posterior diversity, as it's called. SARS-2, of course, it's either in one market or it's in no markets. There's no other proposal for a market origin from it. 457 animals were tested in the market. 0 were found to be infected. SARS-1, 92 animals, 100% infected. The vendors, the wildlife vendors in SARS-1 were all infected. We have 10 vendors here. None of them are infected. One vendor had bamboo rats from southern China, where the backbone comes from. He wasn't infected. His animals weren't infected. SARS-2 has no posterior diversity. So it really, as Dr. Anderson said, it's one jump from one animal to one human. The most likely place that happens is in a laboratory. And again, to be clear, when you say an animal, it could be a petri dish. It could be animal cells in a petri dish. The question of where the origins came
Yeah, that's what you said.
from is the question of where the animal is. And they've tested 96 animals in Nature, and they've tested 0 animals at Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's where we need to look.
You know what? That's a really good point. We've tested all these animals from the market. None of them were positive. Even the guy who, because the big claim was, it was this guy who got like a bat, right? That was the claim. And this bat was infected. Well, the bamboo wasn't infected. He didn't have anything. None of the other animals that he had anything. They were all clear. Now, I do find it very interesting that there was an outbreak the last time, and it came from a wet market. And now they're saying this time it's also from a wet market. Last time it was a bunch of wet markets. This time it was just one. I mean, you would, and last time, okay, yeah, they found a whole bunch, like you said, 100% of the animals were infected last time. That's genuinely where at least whether intentional or accidental release was. This time, none of them. So 102.32 to 110.30 is the next one. And that is actually Senator Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin. Johnson from Wisconsin. 102.32. Oh, look at that. Perfection. Here we go.
We need a lot more of these. I want to thank all the witnesses for your very detailed testimony. And I'd encourage anybody viewing this hearing to go online and read the detailed testimony. I think you'll find it very difficult to not come away after reading that we may not have a smoking gun, but the circumstantial evidence is strong that this was a man-made virus and that it was probably leaked from a lab, probably at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. One thing that's convinced me very early on, I've been convinced this quite some time, is just the cover-up. I mean, the fact the Chinese took down data sets. So all of a sudden you couldn't find a smoking gun because it no longer exists. And we'll probably never know that. But also the cover-up here within the U.S. government. I've been doing oversight on our response to COVID, which, by the way, was a miserable failure. We're 4% of the world's population. We apparently experienced 16% of the deaths. Supposedly the most modern medical system in the world. That's a miserable failure. And so we need to do a lot of oversight, not just on the origin, which is an important aspect of this, but on everything, okay? If we're serious about this, by the way, we got to start letting subpoenas start flying. I'll do this one more time. I've done this multiple times. This is the 50 final pages of Fauci's emails. By the way, the only reason we realize that Fauci was engaged in a cover-up with Dr. Gary is the fact that we had to FOIA these. They didn't turn these over, which they should have. We had to FOIA them. We had to go to court. Our staff has taken the 4,000 pages that we got that were redacted, narrowed those down to 400 pages, and they allowed us to look at these things unredacted in a reading room. 350 pages, but not the final 50. In terms of the cover-up, my guess is the smoking gun exists somewhere under these heavy redactions. So my suggestion, actually my plea to the chairman, is to issue a subpoena to get these final 50 pages, then maybe we'll get a full extent of the extensive cover-up. Dr. Gary, I don't know, have you ever used the word conspiracy theory as it relates to the lab leak? Have you ever accused people who put that thing forward, they're a bunch of conspiracy theorists?
Not in my public.
Okay, well, I'll tell you who has, is the chief editor-in-chief of Nature magazine that published the proximate origin. He said, talking about your study, your cover-up, great work. We'll put conspiracy theories about the origin of SARS-CoV-2 to rest. Will you at least admit that people who are raising the possibility of a lab leak were not conspiracy theorists, that they were legitimate concern about gain-of-function research creating this chimeric virus?
Of course, sir. I mean, that would include us at the very beginning.
That's progress. That's progress because, again, an awful lot of people's reputations were ruined by this cover-up and by the accusations of people being conspiracy theorists. Dr. Ebright, the purpose of this hearing really is to talk about the danger of gain-of-function research. Right now we're about ready to be scaremongered. I think we're already being scaremongered on H5N1. Back in late 2011, the world learned of two scientific teams, one in University of Wisconsin-Madison, one in the Netherlands, that had apparently said each of these labs created H5N1 viruses that gained the ability to spread through the air between ferrets. The animal model used to study how flu viruses might behave in humans. That's pretty darn dangerous stuff, right? That is primarily what led to the moratorium on gain of function, correct?
That is correct.
What possible reason is there to be producing what nature probably couldn't produce? Why are we doing this?
It's important to emphasize that the research in question has zero civilian practical applications. Gain-of-function research on potential pandemic pathogens is not used and does not contribute to the development of vaccines and is not used and does not contribute to the development of drugs.
So
Let that sink in. This whole gain of function thing, the things that they're talking about, have zero civilian uses.
Yeah.
None. They don't help with stopping it. They don't help with vaccines. They don't help with inoculations, all the stuff, right? It doesn't help at all. The only reason to do this is to create more dangerous viruses. That's it.
So again, that rationale for all this research is exactly that. In case we
But
have to
it's not.
respond, but that's the rationale. In case we have to respond to a bioweapon attack, okay?
That's what they say.
We need a defense mechanism. So that's the reason, for example, the Defense Department has spent $42 million or funded Eco Health Alliance for $42 million and USAID for $53 million, correct?
So the current definition is research that is reasonably anticipated to increase either the transmissibility or the virulence of a potential pandemic pathogen. That research does not contribute to developing countermeasures against potential
But again,
pandemic
that's the
pathogens.
rationale they used. You know, the thing they really scared the public on was the 1918 flu pandemic, correct? Even Anthony Fauci admitted most people who died of the flu pandemic died of pneumonia because we didn't have antibiotics, correct?
Bacterial pneumonia.
I think one of the things we have to provide oversight is the sabotage of early treatment using widely available, cheap, and safe generic drugs. We didn't do that. I mean, from my standpoint, the first thing we ought to be doing in any kind of pandemic is there some way to treat this? And let doctors be doctors. Let them practice medicine. Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of Miller's ratchet, correct?
Of what?
Miller's ratchet. Okay, well, it's basically what viruses generally do is they'll become more transmissible but less pathogenic. Okay, because again, it doesn't do, a virus snuffs itself out. MERS snuffed itself out. SARS snuffed itself out, except there were a couple lab leaks that produced SARS outbreaks, correct? So again, my point is, are we making things worse with human intervention? Producing vaccines that are not sterilizing, that allow variants to be produced, and things like antibody-dependent enhancement. Again, there's an awful lot of concern that we don't even consider here because we're on this quest to have a vaccine for everything and produce vaccines for viruses that haven't even been created yet in the lab. Again, that's the question we ought to be asking this committee is, what in the world are we doing? What's the rationale for doing this? And are we actually causing more harm than good?
With vaccine development, I would disagree. The vaccines in general do not pose significant harms and offer significant benefits. With respect to the gain of function research, which creates new threats, biological threats that do not exist currently and might not naturally come into existence in a decade, a century, or a millennium, that research creates threats. And those threats are existentially risky threats. And that research is being conducted without a justifiable rationale. There is no rationale in terms of development of countermeasures. Industry develops vaccines and therapeutics against diseases currently in humans, not against diseases that don't yet exist and need to be made in a lab.
We could use a public debate regarding all things vaccine, the profit motive of it, and everything else, but that's for another day.
You ready for the? I know there's quite a few bombshells on this, but just wait to the last clip.
Okay. All right. Yeah. According to Shawn here, you guys hang tight. I know there's a lot, but it's the ending of this apparently is buck wild. So we'll see. As a matter of fact, we're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I said it was the last clip.
Okay. All right. So 114.57 to 118.51. And this is Senator Paul
Marshall.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to. I messed up. Again, my fault. It takes a little bit, man, to put all this in. And okay, so 114.57 to 118.51. This is Senator Marshall, Republican from Kentucky.
Kansas.
I'm just messing all up.
It's okay.
Yeah, now that I put my glasses on, it is KS. Not
It's okay.
all right. 1457. I hate glasses. I hate having to wear glasses. They really get on my nerves. So I try to avoid wearing them whenever possible. And that leads to errors. So, all right, here we go. Buckle up.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But of all the smoking guns, and this is the hardest to explain to people, is just the genetic makeup of this virus. And you pointed out the protein spike. The protein spike alone would be like a person. The protein spike that fits into a lung cell would be like the chances of a person walking in the room with the key that fits the lock on those doors. I mean, it was a perfect protein spike. You mentioned the furin cleavage site. There's other spots. But I wanted to talk about the ORF8 site for just a second. Dr. Quay, what's the significance of this ORF8 site?
So ORF8 is a protein that's down near the right-hand side of the virus. It is not in the final virus. It is secreted into the bloodstream, and it does two things. Early in the infection, it blocks interferon expression, so you don't sweat, you don't have a fever, you don't show the symptoms of an infection. And later in the infection, it blocks what's called antigen MHC presentation. So we learned from HIV that a virus that can block the ability of pieces of the virus to be presented to the immune system is a virus that is very hard to make antibodies against, very hard to fight against it. Two master's theses during 2015 that have only been published in Chinese, no papers came from it at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, it created a synthetic cloning system for ORF8. Right. So gain-of-function research around things that make viruses asymptomatic and things that make them not be able to make antibodies to are beyond the pale of what Dr. Ebright has said in terms of the civilian use.
If I could, Dr. Quay,
no civilian
so
use.
really, this ORF8 is a synthetic link sequence, never found in nature, and they place it in here. Right? They place this link in here for the purposes of the two cardinal sins, the cardinal sin of asymptomatic virus and then transmission without that symptom as well, and the inability to make an immune response. I mean, that's the cardinal sins of gain-of-function research. What purpose would there be if you're wanting to develop vaccines? Is there any civilian purpose, or is this, in fact, a bioweapon?
I can't say it's a bioweapon because that's in the mind of the person that made it, but it is highly unusual, highly synthetic. They were doing synthetic biology around it, and its two functions are quite remarkable with respect to what kind of research you would do in the civilian world.
Dr. Ebert, is there a possibility that it could have been a dual purpose, that they could have been used as a bioweapon?
So the original SARS virus, SARS-CoV-1, is a tier 1 select agent in the United States. So it is in the group of pathogens and biological toxins that our federal government has identified as having high potential for use as a bioweapon in biowarfare, bioterrorism, or biocrime.
I want to make sure you guys caught what he just said. SARS-CoV-1, the H1N1, right?
I think that was MERS. Was
MERS?
it MERS or SARS? Yes.
SARS. The thing that was all over during the Obama administration, the thing that, they were talking about earlier, definitely came from the market, right? Has been classified as a bioweapon. End of story. It's a bioweapon.
By definition, therefore, according to our federal government, is a bioweapon agent. It is not a bioweapon, but it is an agent that potentially could be used.
Is there any good reason to put this in the virus if you're developing a vaccine?
I would return to my general comment on gain-of-function research on potential pandemic pathogens. The research has no civilian practical application. Researchers undertake it because it is fast, it is easy, it requires no specialized equipment or skills, and it was prioritized for funding and has been prioritized for publication by scientific journals. These are major incentives to researchers worldwide, in China and in the US. The researchers undertake this research because it's easy, they get the money, and they can get the papers.
Bingo. Why do they do it? It's not for you and me. It's because it pays the bills. It's easy, it's fast, and they have, like he said, SARS-CoV-1, the originator, is what he said, a bioweapon agent. It's not a bioweapon in and of itself,
but it could be used with something else.
Right. You can use it with something, or especially if you modify it.
Isn't that terrifying?
What were they talking about? They were talking about somebody modifying viruses. And why do they do it? Because it's easy and it's cheap to do. And they get paid very, very well to do that. That's insane, man.
Isn't it? I told you that the last clip was
that
bombshell.
Is absolutely insane. I'll tell you, like, the more that comes, and bear in mind that the guy made a great point earlier, and that is people were literally thrown off of platforms, Twitter, Facebook, countless others, right? YouTube for a while. You couldn't say anything about the lab leak theory because that was not the WHO approved talking points. Number one, why the hell is an American company listening to anything the WHO has to say? But number two, you're a platform, not a publisher. Discussion for a different time. But you couldn't say any of that, which now there are countless scientists who have come out and said, yeah, overwhelmingly, we believe this. There's no smoking gun per se, but I mean, to a degree, you have to look at what the evidence shows. And the evidence shows that this came from at least some lab. And if it came from some lab, what's the most likely lab? Occam's razor, because he said, multiple people have said this stuff doesn't occur in nature. Even the guy who was arguing that it didn't come from a lab told us it cannot have gone from a bat directly to. Even the people who claim it didn't come from a lab and it came from the market can't explain how it came from the market. But the people who believe it was a lab leak can easily, or at least was created in a lab. How it got out is a matter of debate. And I don't know that we'll ever for sure know the answer, whether it was an accident, whether it was intentional, whether, John just forgot to wash his hands before he went to grab his, snack from the market. Who knows? It's very concerning when you look at the fact that they're not using proper safety protocols there. That makes it all the more likely that something was bound to happen. It's only a matter of time. So if you look at it like this, right, I will definitively say that I wholeheartedly agree with the one guy who said our response to this was abysmal. It was abysmal. Why, though? Why was it so bad? And I would offer that it was so bad because the media insisted that everything Trump said was wrong. Trump told us it's easy to treat. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
He said it's easy to treat. Go get yourself some HCQ. Go get yourself some ivermectin, right? But of course, to the media, he told everybody to stab themselves in the arm with bleach, inject yourself with bleach. That's one reason why our country suffered so badly with it. The other aspect was the ventilators. They were putting people on ventilators and killing them.
Yeah.
Once again, the media, they need to be tried. They, in my opinion, the people that knowingly deceived the American people about this stuff need to be put on trial.
There was a lot of followers too.
Oh my God, so many followers. And, you know, I would be very, very, very interested to see what is in that last little stack of emails.
Oh yeah.
Of what
We might
is,
never know though.
Yeah, what is blacked out. What did he have to say? This is the last little stack of the Fauci mails, right? Yeah, you guys, if you remember WikiLeaks, there was some very, very interesting and very, very disturbing things that were found in John Podesta's emails.
Oh yeah.
Very, very disturbing.
Very disturbing.
Yeah. If it's anything like that, and I don't mean directly, you know, like, I'm not going to go into it, but if you guys aren't familiar with what was in John Podesta's emails, look up WikiLeaks, John Podesta's emails, and go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But I'll say this. I firmly believe that the severity and the potential implications are just as bad. We'll have to see. Yeah, well, we have no idea. Currently, like he said, he's trying to get the last of it unredacted.
We'll see if Senator Johnson can do it.
Yeah, we'll see if he can do it. I've been very disappointed with the performance of all of these committees and these these hearings and all of that stuff. But don't expect these people to get anything done. I'll say that. However, the more important part is you and I can watch this testimony and we can go, that makes sense. Do not fall for their bullshit again. Seriously. Don't listen to them when they tell you, because that's the next thing, right? The avian flu, right? The bird flu is the next big, terror thing. Oh my God, be afraid. Don't listen to those people. Do what we were told by somebody who was trying to help us out is my, particular word of advice. I have looked into it. I have seen that there is no reason, there's no ill effects from these medications that Trump put out there that I could find. I mean, just saying, the HCQ has been in use for how long? It's like 60 something years. It's used for malaria. And it was like pennies compared to these treatments that they want to give you that are how much?
A lot.
A whole lot. It's always a whole lot.
It's about the money.
It's always about the money. It's always about the money, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. I hope you were able to learn something. And I'm glad. I don't like wearing headphones.
I don't either.
I don't really care for it. But in order to prevent the echo, I'm still going to work on trying to figure out a different method, even if it's something as little as like a little earbud or something that I can plug in my ear. But we're working on it.
Okay.
We're working on it. It's really frustrating when you create what you think is a high quality video. That had the International Criminal Court one was really good, I thought.
It was.
But unfortunately, it was really, really echoey. I don't know. It used to not happen. Now it does. I even tried moving the speakers and doing a bunch of stuff. The only other alternative is to turn the sound down, and you guys will have to crank it up. And that's not really an option. So we're getting it sorted. But as an update, there was no video this morning. My buddy who I do coffee break with, Jim, he was involved in an accident on his motorcycle. We thought he'd be good by now, but apparently his knee is like super swollen. So he had to go to see his, I don't know what you call it.
Orthopedic?
Yeah, the orthopedic. I don't know if it's an orthopedist or an orthopedic surgeon, but he went to see them and he had to do physical therapy and they ordered an MRI so they can take a look at it. But hopefully he's good. it's weird because he doesn't think he hit his knee or did anything to his knee, but he went to work Monday night, right? And by the end of the morning, when he got off of work, he said his knee was like super swollen. So I'm not sure when he's going to be back. We're going to try to get him in here soon to at least get something recorded, but I think he's probably going to be doing physical therapy on Wednesday morning. So we may either have to record it and then play it or have it on a different day. But listen, tomorrow night, the debate.
I can't wait.
I cannot wait for this. You guys make sure you come. Seriously, watch the debate with us. It's going to be amazing. We're going to use either headphones or something to make sure we're not getting the echo because we're going to have the video, but we're going to make sure. I'd be very careful about drinking games on this debate because if man, oh man, it's going to be wild.
It will be.
It's going to be wild. I'm fully expecting at the last minute for Biden to pull him out, like his team to pull him out of it. But I hope.
We'll see.
We'll see.
I don't see it happening.
I don't know. You don't see the debate happening, or you don't see them pulling him.
I don't see him pulling him out.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. So make sure it starts at 8
p.m. our time.
8 p.m. Central Time, and it's supposed to go from 8 to 10. So I'll probably have a video up because I'm a little behind. We're coming up, just so you guys know, we're coming up on our 300th upload to the streaming platforms, right? I did more videos, but they were in the beginning, and it was just like to Facebook before I started doing it to multiple destinations. I'm on my coming up very soon, my 300th episode. I actually genuinely considered trying to put some out so that the debate would be the 300th. I may still do that. Let me know what you guys think. Tell me in the comments if you'd like the debate to be the 300th or if you want me to do something different and special for the 300th episode. Again, 300th uploaded. I've done way more than that because I did it like every night for
I remember that.
like a couple of years, man, going just like to Facebook and stuff. But those were terrible. They were a guy trying to figure out how equipment worked, and it was interesting. But yeah, tomorrow night, 8 p.m., presidential debate, or at least a president and a resident. And it's going to be incredible.
It's going to be epic.
It's going to be epic. So I hope you'll join us. That's it. You got anything else for him?
Nope. Just excited about tomorrow.
I am super excited. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. God bless you. God bless Indiana. And God bless the United States of America. It's going to be a glorious day. Night.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Shawn Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.